right, welcome to Breakdown, the Poet and the Poems, a conversation series to spread awareness of poets and their poetry as inspiration and motivation for our everyday life journeys. I am your host or hostess, Tamara J. Madison, and this particular season of Breakdown, we are working on what I call lineage literature. And it is poets who are writing about their lineage or deeply inspired by their lineage. And today, that's the reason why I'm so excited. My guest poet is Joanne Godley, and we will be talking about how the Black Panthers fell from the sky. Welcome, Joanne.
Thank you, Tamara. I'm good. Really glad to see you.
I'm glad to see you too, as you can tell, right? I want to start off by sharing your bio so that everybody knows who you are. Joanne Godley is a thrice nominated Pushcart and Best of Net poet and writer. She is an MFA graduate from Pacific University, where she was a Kwame Dawes Map Makers Scholarship recipient. She is a retired gastroenterologist, public health administrator, and bioethicist. Godley has 2 adult children and 2 grandchildren. She lives in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico, where she practices ease. We'll have to talk about that one day off camera, right? Godley's work has appeared or is forthcoming in Crab Orchard Review, Decolonial Passage, the Kenyon Review Online, the Massachusetts Review, among others. An essay of hers received an honorable mention in the 2025 Terry Tempest Williams Prize in Creative Nonfiction. She is an Anaphora Arts Fellow in Poetry and Fiction and has attended the Bread Loaf Writers Conference, the Kenyon Writers Workshop, and VONA. Her 2 poetry chapbooks are Picking Scabs from the Body History and Doc X. Her first full-length poetry collection, How the Black Panthers Fell from the Sky, is a memoir in verse, which won the Naomi Long Madgett Award for 2025. It will be published in February of 2026. Congratulations! How does that feel to you?
It feels surreal hearing it, and I'm still pinching myself.
Okay.
But it's great. It's great.
Yes. Yes. Good. All right. So I'm so excited about this book because we talked about it a year and a half ago, and at that time, it was a seedling. I say it was a seedling, but I think it was a seedling that had already started rooting. Do you agree?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Okay. All right. And so I'm excited to bring it forward at this particular time. And customary on Breakdown, when I'm reading and studying a book to prep for the interview, right? I always challenge myself to do my own or a breakdown blurb for the book, right? In terms of where the book takes me. And it also kind of cues the poet to where I will probably be traveling in this conversation with the book. Are you ready?
Interesting. Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, it's a great exercise, by the way. You ought to try it. All right, so here is the blurb. With humor, wit, and grit, Joanne Godley's memoir in verse, How the Black Panthers Fell from the Sky, reminds us that even as cities burn and a country collapses, our youth are closely watching, taking notes, taking names, while courageously grasping the torch and running it forward, whether we, as elders, mentors, revolutionaries, grow in grace or fall far, far from it.
That is apt. That is exactly spot on.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that partially comes from my own place as a teenager, right? When we start learning about, for lack of better words, the unpleasantries of the world that we were so long protected from, when that door opens, right, and that innocence starts to fade, it's always such a vulnerable time, right?
Right.
Because you have to
I mean,
figure out what to do with all of that.
and I'm not sure that as elders, there's an appreciation for the inner torment that the youth go through
Hmm.
during that time. I think you described it perfectly. When I was just pre-pubertal, 11 or 12, I started writing poetry, and I called my poems of Black pessimism
Mm,
because I was disturbed, about the civil rights struggles and the lack of real forward progress, at least at the time that I was coming into my teenage years.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think you're absolutely right. I think adults don't have an appreciation for that, right? And when I say appreciation, I probably should use the word acknowledgement of that. It's almost as if adults forget when that happened for them, because I'm sure it's happened for every generation, right? And, adults often have, especially in our community, you have those elders who say, anything you think about doing, I done already done it, that type of thing, right? But
Yes,
every generation grows up in a context that those before them did not have. And
right.
I think sometimes we forget to take that into consideration. Yeah, and I think that makes it even harder for young people who are grappling with those things, you know? Um, so I wanted to start with the poem that had me hollering in my living room. Let's go to
Okay.
page 5. Let's go to page 5. And I'm going to go ahead and be transparent. I want you to know that I done already called up 2 poets that I know and had to read this poem on the phone. Okay? The elders recount my birth story. Yeah, that's where we'll start. And just so that you know, I have my pen, my highlighters, all my notes and everything. So I'm not being distracted from you. I'm actually diving into the poetry as you're reading it. You ready?
Okay. Yes, I'm ready.
Okay.
The elders recount my birth story. This midnight traveler baby, she wears night like an indigo overcoat, guzzles the throat of warm rebellion, daughter of a woman harnessed to despair. This newly born child, black as the Igbo goddess Oduda, black as the Mamani River. She sips rage and hope from her mother's teat. Hope. She pats the vessel breast with tiny hands. Hope travels with her, through her, while the family bones rage. We wait before the before. We wait for her, drinking milky elixir, having seen the mirror of memory's fire. We wait for her to tell us how hearts marooned from bodies swam, waited underwater, how it was passing through a womb of shards, birth as a million small cuts, the lynching of black liquid soul. How could we not carry what she saw? How could we not pick up those tortured tombs? She carries the whole plantation on her face, in her sighs, on her chubby legs. Where did pain not make its mark? She stretches her arms upwards towards the night sky's bright eye, pain disguised as rope bites. pain as small, small shudders. We are surrounded by the restless, eager to sleep, open and prepared to swallow her grief. This child, doomed with the delirium of history, kissed the hollow of her neck as night curdles into day. God, it's a wonder she even knows how to smile.
Okay, I have read that poem so many times. So many times. Besides the two times I called somebody and read it over the phone. And there was a whole nother dimension of the poem that opened up for me when you read it, right? I think all of the other times when I read it, I related to the child, right? Everything from the chubby legs and all of that. And that line, she wears the whole plantation on her face. I was like, what? Wait, hold on. Like, wait a minute, right? This is the first poem, the first page, right? So I think I related to all of that and that deep, deep connection that began from birth. But when you read it, I related to the mother because I nursed my own babies, right? And that whole description of whatever the mother is enduring, flowing to the child through what is supposed to be sustenance, how it can't help but be passed. I don't think that really registered to me until you actually read it. And I was like, oh, so that's what got me about this poem, because I am both the mother and the child. What
Right.
inspired you to write this piece?
I was taking a workshop on speculative poetry.
Mm.
And I had to write something that was sort of out of this world. And I was also influenced by uh, I think her name is
Mm-hmm.
Warsanshire, who writes a lot about war and the effects of war on people who are going through it. So that was I don't know how to explain how else it came to me. Originally, the protagonist or the baby was actually, I'll just tell you this, was an animal, but then I changed it to a human being.
Mm.
And then as I realized that it could be a baby, I then was able to layer the things that, as you said, the baby is sort of saddled with coming into this world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting that there is an exchange going on throughout the poem, an exchange between the child that is in the world and the ancestors that are in the otherworldly, right? And very often, I think we hear people talking about the ancestors are there and we're here and they're supposed to be doing things for us. But to me, it's very clear that in this piece, there's an exchange going on. Because that last line, God, it's a wonder she even knows how to smile. That signaled for me, oh, she's already doing something for them. So there's already this exchange going on that I thought was just really, really beautiful. Do you think that it is important for people to know their birth stories? I have a very selfish reason for asking that. Do you know your own, like, more mundane birth story?
I know, yes, I know my birth story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what I think is important is to um, celebrate and acknowledge the birth story. Um, when I was born, a friend of my parents he was Ethiopian, and he wrote a whole poem, almost like an ode, to my coming into being. And so I did that for my grandson when he was born.
Do you still have that poem?
Unfortunately, no, no,
Oh, wow.
no.
What an amazing gift. That's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. Okay. Okay. Um how do you manage to smile?
I think I smile, as does the child at some point, because of hope. Because I'm hopeful. I'm I'm both pessimistic but also hopeful.
Mhm. Mhm. That's in the clear in the poem too because there's both hope and rage flowing through the breast, right? And there's
Right.
this beautiful way that they balance, I think, throughout the book. And that's why in the blurb it was important for me to say humor and wit. I'm not asking you to read them today, but I just want to put a teaser out into the universe about the love poems to Huey Newton from a teenager. Oh my God, that had me going. It had me going, but I was like, nope, I'm gonna save those. I'm gonna save those. Let's go to speaking of the birth story, let's go to the mother poem on page 9. Lessons in Resistance.
You're
Lessons.
picking out some of my favorites, you know.
Oh, good, good, good. Lessons in Resistance. Oh,
Lessons in resistance. I lean back against the firmness of my mother's thighs, sheathed in brown wool slacks. She wears no nonsense walking shoes and a striped shirt. A gray cardigan is draped across her shoulders, which she removes to cover my shivering ones. Her dark hair is pulled back in a bun. The fiery orange globe illuminates the blue gray swath of sky and provides an illusion of autumn afternoon warmth. On nearby urban side streets, black walnut and red maple trees have begun the transition to red and gold foliage. Each time we attend a march, she clasps my hands around the wooden handle to demonstrate how I should hold my sign as we join fellow protesters. This is my introduction to the streets where federal buildings are located: West Lafayette Street, Warren Avenue, Michigan Avenue, and where we march to demand an end to nuclear armament, support the Voting Rights Act, condemn the Bay of Pigs, and uphold abortion rights. We insist that all political prisoners be freed. My mother is a patient teacher in the art of protest and explains the hows and whys of saying no to the establishment. Her word, not mine. I wrinkle my nose in the Detroit air that reeks of sweat and smoke. My mother chooses me, 12 years old and the eldest of four, to be her political protest companion on weekends when my homework and house chores are complete.
okay. Obvious first question. How did it feel to have the revolutionary protest mama? When everybody else's mama was at home baking cookies, right? Watching over homework and scurrying about the house, right? As so many women did in the 50s and 60s. How did it feel to have the mama that drags you out to the protest march?
It felt, well, first of all, I adored my mother,
Uh-huh.
and it felt special. I felt like I was an anointed one, you know, that I was able to do this thing that she obviously valued, and you know, I was willing to ride with her.
Were you ever afraid?
You know, I think that's one of the complicated things about youth, but no, it never actually occurred to me to be afraid.
Wow. When I read the poem, the first thing I thought about was your mother's fear, right? And how many mothers at that time were telling their children not to go out there, not be a part, because they were so afraid of what might happen for their children. And here you are, your mother takes you out there. I was like, this woman is like a superhero. She's not even scared of taking her child. I can see maybe leaving the child at the auntie's house or a neighbor's house and going, but no, she took you with her. That to me was really fascinating. What do you admire most about her?
I admire the fact that my mother really followed her own path.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and from that, I was able to learn from her, um, to, you know, forge my own way.
Mm-hmm.
She was very independent, even though it was the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Um, she was her own person. She was a nurse,
Okay.
and she later went back to school to become a public health administrator.
Mm-hmm.
But she started out as a home health nurse. And I found when I was going through papers, dealing with my family, that as a young home health nurse, she wrote a letter to a nursing journal explaining to them that it was important for Black nurses to take care of Black patients, and that their outcomes seemed to be different when they were um, linked with people who understood their background. So she wrote a paper saying this, and I saw the letter from the nursing journal, writing back and saying, "I'm sorry, this is not something that's appropriate for our readers."
Have you ever thought about bringing that back?
I don't think that the nursing journal exists now, so no, I didn't. But I, at some point, want to
Mm-hmm.
write about it
Mm-hmm.
and write
Because
about my mother.
yeah, I immediately thought about, the controversy that is ongoing about the care of Black patients right now in 2025. And the recent video that came out about the Black woman that was in labor,
Yeah.
in the admitting office and that type of thing, and all the kinds of things, and the high mortality rate of Black women in birth in this country, right? I think that would, not that I'm your agent or anything, but I'm just saying, poet to poet, I think that that would be really fascinating to bring her letter and that response forward into 2025, and then whatever you have to add on that and present that someplace, whether it's a literary journal or a medical journal or what have you. I think that that's very timely for right now.
Well, it also says something that you have what, um, 50, 60 years between,
Hmm.
actually more than that, between that event and now, and things have not changed significantly.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting, that your mother was her own kind of revolutionary, even if she wasn't a Panther. How could you
Right.
not? How could you not? Okay, we got to go to home hunger. You go to page 12 for me.
Sure.
And while you're pulling that up, I was really tickled about some of the similarities that in this book that reflected my own journey. Um, and this reminded me of some things. I'll just put it that way.
Home hunger. I fat fear my father. In our house, fatness is a boogeyman who terrorizes the whole family. Father's favorite fare is canned peaches and cottage cheese for each meal whenever he is weight worried. He browbeats my mother so that we never run low on either food item. He has never been fat, but speaks about the condition with revulsion. I do not learn about obsessive compulsive behavior until I reach med school. Father's mantra is men like women, tall, lean, and hungry.
I noticed that breath that you took after you read that. What does that line mean to you? Men like women, tall, lean, and hungry. Or let me say, what did that line mean to him?
That line meant, that line for him was a cautionary tale for me. Um, I heard it from such a young age that I didn't really understand what it meant. You know, it was just sort of like it was a mantra. And it was only as an adult, looking back, I realized that it was it was so completely inappropriate to say to a young girl coming into her own, especially a black girl, um, because you know our body proportions are not typically tall and lean. So yeah, it really spoke more about my father's uh, fears in terms of um, in terms of what he did not, you know, what he wanted to avoid or not happen with his daughters. Although he did not say this to any other, you know, he didn't tell my sister this. He just
Oh,
told
really?
no, yeah,
Interesting. Was your sister tall and lean?
no. My sister, it was quite the opposite. And
Okay.
you know, it's possible that he changed and became a bit more realistic, or he, you know, just had a set of parental approaches that he tried out on his firstborn, which I was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what do you think he feared?
He feared the stereotypical black fat woman.
Mm. Mm. Do you think he feared no one would want his daughters?
Um, I don't. I really think that the fear was more his.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't think he was projecting what he wanted for us. I think it was just his personal fear of having daughters who looked a certain way.
Wow. Wow. The thing that struck me about that line was, first of all, that all men want the same thing in the first place, right? And like you said, for most of us come out round and brown, right? That's the way, you know, many of us are. And start shaping up and things like that very quickly because that was so me. That was so me. And I was always having to fight with guys like, no, I really am 13. You know what I mean? And nobody believed me, that type of thing. That's a lot of pressure to grow up with, right? And then when you have this other pressure telling you that's what you're not supposed to be in the first place, and you're like, but how can I help it? What can I do? And I'm not going to ask you to read this one, but I just want to say, listen here, the girdle poem, okay? That's
I was
something
just
that, look, a whole bunch of people don't know about these days, but I was like, hallelujah to the girdle poem. I understand exactly what you meant. Do you feel like you ever met your father's expectations?
um, in terms of form, I have to say no. And the reason is because he was from the South. He was from North Carolina, small town, Antigo. Um, and his mother, who was a powerhouse of a person. I always say, and I think I said this in her obituary when I was speaking about her, that she would have been a CEO of a corporation in another life.
Mm.
Um, she told her sons, three children, she had five daughters, three sons. She told each of them to marry light
Ah.
in order to help your children. And my father took that to heart in such a way, I think it was probably unconscious, because my mother was fair skinned,
Mm-hmm.
and I am his color.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm pretty sure that in that way I did not meet his expectations. Actually, all of us came out his color.
Mm. Interesting. I gotta ask though, was his mother tall, lean, and hungry?
She was short and round
Uh,
and dark.
mm, okay. Okay. I had to ask because I have a theory about that, but I'm gonna keep that to myself. I'm gonna
My
keep that to
grand my
myself.
grandfather was tall and fair skinned.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's such a complicated history, our culture.
It is. It is. Absolutely. What's the greatest gift your father gave you?
I think my father's greatest gift is um, my intellect,
Mm-hmm.
my intellect, and my mother's greatest gift, I think, is my curiosity and desire to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Um, both of those are very intellectual, I mean, very thinking things,
Mm-hmm.
but that's what I got.
I got you. I got you. All right, so we're going to go ahead and ease on into that rite of passage, page 14. And I want to preface this poem by saying, by lovingly saying how beautifully human we all are, and how, in spite of the gifts, we realize at a certain point that our parents are human and they're trying to figure it out just like we are, you know,
Right.
at a certain point.
Rites of passage. Tonight, my father serves me a knuckle sandwich, a preview of future meals. Faster than I can say, "Pass the peas, please." My father delivers a shearing jaw hook. He Valiums his tension with me as the punching bag. From the living room stereo, Lou Rawls sips hallowed muddy water. Through clotted tears, my mother cooks an initiatory broth from desiccated bone, adds marrow because her own is low, strokes my face, my nose nub, squints her one good eye, says, "Looks like you're a woman now."
Okay, so that one I wasn't ready for. I did not I did not see that coming. It was a color purple moment for me. Um because it reminded me of that moment in the field with Sophia and Celie and all of that, or Celie's advice to Harpo to beat her or whatever. And I was just like, wait a minute, like just wait a minute. I wasn't prepared for that one. And it was interesting the word choices you used: knuckle sandwich, jaw hook, um, and then the knuckle sandwich, a preview of future meals. I was just like, oh my goodness, I wasn't prepared for that. And then your mother's response, right? And I was like, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Because this is the same woman that is going to protest marches, right? But here she is talking about this is your initiation. And everything was just swirling for me. And again, it was about yeah, we're very complicated creatures and we're beautifully human. Why do you think your mother stayed?
Yeah. I think my mother stayed for us,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
as contradictory as that sounds. Um, as soon as I went off to college, and I went to college, started college at a young age, she left. She went underground for a year. The first year I was in college, she actually was unable to be found and would periodically surface and call and say that, she was okay and just check in. But it was a year that she was gone. And during that time, went through a legal process. And by the time she resurfaced, she was in a position to divorce, and she purchased a small home not far from where my father lived. Um, I think it was necessary because my father was pretty rageful, volatile, and the space was, in retrospect, necessary for him to just, calm way down,
Mm-hmm.
and realize that she meant business.
Your mama was a badass. Like for
Well,
real. Like for
right.
real. And when I say that, I mean that in a very complimentary way, but in a very, very honest way. Um, because you said that she went underground and she resurfaced. And for her to resurface and purchase her own home in the same neighborhood with your dad, that's a powerful statement. Like
That is
she was
actually
like,
true. I've
look,
never,
I ain't scared. I just needed to pull back and just, pull some things together, and I'm back. And I'm back even stronger, even better than before. And I think, when I first asked that question, why do you think she stayed? I was actually thinking of many women during the era, many, many women, right, who chose to stay for their children. But a lot of them never left. They never left. And then some of them who did leave, they would not dare resurface in such a fashion. You know what I mean? In such a powerful fashion. Wow. I don't think I've ever, I love stories and collect them, but I don't think I've ever heard a story like that before.
yeah, I think part of the reason in the before the 60s, part of the reason was financial. A lot of the reason was
Mm-hmm.
financial. Most women were not making their own money. They were tethered to their husbands, um, just in terms of having a roof and food to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And in the early 70s is when women got the right to have a credit card and a right to own their own home. And that may actually have been why she really stayed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And then I think sometimes women stayed because they had daughters. And that was the proper ladylike thing to do. And having that kind of, setting that kind of example was really, really important because even if you did have money, who were you without a husband?
well,
And that's hard for many of us to think about. But in that era, I think that that was still really important. I think it was starting to turn at that particular time.
Let me just interject one thing about my mother. It is actually from my mother when she was living in my father's household that I learned the value of traveling on one's own because she took vacations. She came often to Mexico. She traveled by herself. She explained to me that it was important to learn how to be comfortable with oneself in terms of going out to eat or going to the movies. And so that was something that I got from her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so even when she was still married, she was still quite independent.
What did you love? Because I think that there's always, even in some of the harshest situation, I think there's always something to savor. What did you love about the two of them together? Is there like a fond memory or something that you loved about the two of them together?
I remember loving watching them dance together. Um, Slow dance.
Oh my goodness, I wish you
uh,
could see your face. Yes, 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 yes. Go ahead.
yeah, I mean, I don't, that's an unusual response perhaps, but I, um, I just that's a memory that I cherish.
Good, good. I think that's important. And I don't think it's unusual at all because mine is very similar. It's watching my parents get dressed up to go to balls and parties and seeing them prepare and then seeing them come together at the front door as they left, um, this beautiful thing that they were together, in spite of all the other stuff that may have been going on. And I think it's really important to hold on to those memories. So thank you for answering that. I know it was an unusual question. All right. So speaking of rites of passage, you had a two-part rite of passage. Let's go to page 19, confession. Because to me, when I was reading this book, I felt like, okay, there was one type of rites of passage that happened in your home with your own body as well as things going on with your parents. But then there's this whole other rites of passage that initiated you about the world. And so, would you share this piece?
Sure. Confession. Epigraph. I don't want America no more. I want to be citizen of something new. Dinez Smith. I dog ear mom's copy of Peyton Place, inhaling the sex scenes. I read and reread my parents' copy of We Charge Genocide. I share this with no one, that this book runs cold fingers up my spine, or that when reading it, my heart tries to run me away, or that I want to stop reading it, but I can't. I run my hands over the black and white photos of once real people hanging from trees, some of them burnt, some of them mutilated. I try to think what must have gone through their minds right before. Who does this? It's a rhetorical question because I see the white people gathered around the trees, watching. I think, no way do I want any parts of this country. No way am I going to raise children here. No way am I going to stay.
That's a lot to see. About how old were you when you read this document?
I'd say I was about 9 or 10.
Wow.
And I'm pretty sure that my parents didn't know about my obsession with this book,
Mm-hmm.
or even that I had seen it. They gave me free rein in terms of their library. And as I said, I just happened upon it.
So tell us about We Charge Genocide for people who are unaware.
Right. We Charge Genocide was a book compiled by a Black civil rights group, the name of which I've forgotten, um, that was presented to the United Nations
Mm-hmm.
in the 50s. And it was a compilation of narratives of Black men and women who had been lynched throughout the country, and also with photographs to basically serve as documentation to the United Nations that the violence committed against Black people in America was systematic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And this was about how many years ago?
It was in the 50s, I'd say mid 50s.
And this is 2025. That's all we need to say. That's all we need to say. How did you navigate that? Like how did you I'm thinking in my mind that you're about 15 or 16, right? And then you correct me and say, "No, I was about 9 or 10 when I discovered that book." How did you keep moving? How did you get up and go to school the next day? I remember what it was like for me to go to school after the first episode of Roots came out, and what it was like for me to go to school the very, very next day, right? My perspective of going to school the next day was very different than all the other little kids that came to the school. Um, and how did you manage to not, how did you manage to not fall from your own sky, having that knowledge? Because you go on, you maintain being a successful student, you're a class officer, you're involved in all of these civic things, you even joined the Panthers, and you manage to graduate as a scholar, and you go on to become a doctor. There are other people who would discover something like that at such a tender age, and they would literally plummet and be sucked up into an inferno. How do you think you managed?
So I think that what happened to me as a result of this experience was very much internal.
Mm-hmm.
I write about this in a memoir that I became kind of emotionally disembodied, and I felt like the country moved away from me.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I coped by just resolving to myself that um, I was not going to I was not going to continue to live here. That at some point I
Mm-hmm.
was going to leave. Of course, it's difficult as a child to keep all of your goals, have all of them come to fruition, because I did have children in the U.S. But it was kind of like a breaking point,
Mm-hmm.
but inside, and it wasn't something I shared with anyone. Um, that's all I can say.
That's the thing that's so um, striking. Many people who hold things inside and have those breaking points inside, the crumbling starts to happen outside, and you managed not to experience that. Were you writing at that time as well? Were you journaling or anything like that during that time?
Well, I would have had a diary.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't writing poetry yet, but I'm sure that this influenced my
Yes.
poems of Black pessimism.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's a safe space. It's a safe space when we can, and I think the same thing happened for me when I started learning about atrocities that were really close by, right? having that page as my safe space to dump anything, to be disrespectful, to be enraged, all of that was really, really important. And I think for me, it made a big difference too. That makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. Okay, so you go from there to running with the big cats. Let's go there on page 45. And while
Okay.
you're looking for that, I just want to share with other people who are watching, who will be watching this. Um, I loved hearing the voice of this adolescent, admiring the Panthers, marching through the neighborhood, wanting to become a part of what was going on, um, having her little crushes and things like that, feeling out her own power. But I didn't want to spoil that for people who would read the book, but let's at least do Running with the Big Cats.
Okay. Running with the big cats. Panthers prowl metros, steeped in black sorrow. Grown men read printed rags, on sale tomorrow. We document urban memories on drama dredged sand. Salvation's inaccessible to the literacy damned. Hostile pigs drink from our community spigots. Hoover spies on programs that give free food to kids. Then Myers admin processes by canceling food permits. Our patience is stymied. We push bankable limits while the government mal-bans the most modest of books. We finger sheath shame in candlelit darkness. Let mamas of the newly assassinated offer words of conscience. We condemn Confederates. We hone salacious rhetoric. Partaking of the struggle, I revel with little reason to see history's arc veer justice word, if only for a season.
I want to go to that line in the earlier part of the poem. Salvation's inaccessible to the literacy damned. There was a moment when I made note that one of your jobs, right, was to teach people how to read, right? How did that feel with you being so young and you're teaching these older people that you admire? Because I remember what it was like to be 16 and the cool guy in the neighborhood that was 25, you know what I mean, that also was handsome and slick and all of that. How did it feel to be teaching older people to read?
It felt odd. And I mean, I have to say that it felt, I felt like it was a responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly it was one of my tasks. Um, but I did realize that it was a little unusual. And I could actually see that with the responses of the men, mainly men. I don't remember actually teaching women.
Mm.
I don't remember women being in the group. Um, I felt in the beginning they were sort of felt as though they seemed to express being out of their comfort zone, to have a young girl, teaching them to read.
Mm-hmm.
But over time, it worked out.
Hmm. Did their ego and resistance ever get in the way of them learning?
In the beginning, yes,
Okay.
because they want to act manly,
Mm-hmm.
flirt, whatever. Although I was actually pretty young to be, you know, worried about their overtures. Um, I think the leaders of the party chapter made it clear that this was something that needed to happen. So I think the overarching discipline helped us work these things out.
Mm-hmm.
My uncomfortable, well, both the guys and myself, in terms of being uncomfortable.
Did you witness any changes as a result of them growing through reading?
Oh, definitely.
Tell us, like what?
Um, I'd say that the changes were probably individual,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of seeming to carry themselves with more self-esteem
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and pride.
So, of course, that's one of the lines I underlined in my notes. Think about the literacy or lack of literacy now from your perspective versus where you were then and what you see going on now, and how not just young people, but how the culture we live in, period, treats or ignores literacy. What do you think of that and the effect of that?
It reminds me of what um, was prevalent during a period of our enslavement
Mm-hmm.
when Black people were forbidden to learn how to read.
Mm-hmm.
That it's like an essential life skill that people have little access to. You know, I think everyone wants to learn how to read, wants to know how to read, but at a certain point, it's uncomfortable and difficult for an adult to admit that they don't know how to read.
That's saying a whole lot. And if this statement says that salvation's inaccessible to the literacy damned, and we are literacy damned, there's a certain kind of salvation, a certain kind of freedom that we don't get to experience. And that's not necessarily somebody else's fault, right? It's something deeper than that. What were some of your other jobs? Were you flipping pancakes?
I
That came up in one of the poems too. What were some of the other
Yes,
responsibilities that you had as a Panther member?
I'd say the Breakfast for Children, the free Breakfast for Children program, participating in that, more serving than cooking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And because the cooking was, in large quantities, and I basically did service, selling the Black Panther Party paper on
Yes.
the street corners.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, I'd say those three things primarily:
Mm-hmm.
teaching reading, serving the breakfast, and selling the paper. A lot of selling the paper.
I have to ask this question, not for myself, but for other people who may be watching. Did you feel safe being involved with the Panthers?
I did. I
Mm-hmm.
did. I felt safe in a way that probably wasn't, in retrospect, realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I had girlfriends in the party. Um, Most of the people were young-ish, late teens, early adulthood. Um, I felt like we were doing something really important. I believed in the missions, and I was I was fearless in a sense, and I mentioned this in a poem, because there was a raid on the Panther House that I was not for which I was not present, and during which uh, someone died. So it that jarred me a little bit, and I realized that um, my fearlessness might not be um, might not be warranted.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. How did your parents feel about you being involved in the party, or did they know? Did they know?
They were aware that I was involved politically. Um, I do not remember explicitly saying that it was the Black Panther Party until later in the journey. They were not happy.
Mm.
And this is my parents, as I shared with you at some point. My parents were political beings early in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
They were in the Communist Party when my father was doing his medical training in New York, and my mother was working as a nurse. They were communists, and this was during the era of the McCarthy. This was the McCarthy era, during which it was very unpopular to be a communist,
Right.
let alone a Black communist. But they never shared that with me. I found that out many years later. I think I was in my 40s when I found that out. And I remember just being aghast because their reaction to my political involvement was quite strong. It just didn't, it for me, it didn't really jive that they understood wanting and needing to be part of a uh, struggle for justice
Mm-hmm.
themselves, but were not willing to have their children or their child do the same.
All right, let's wrap up with Blood Promise. Blood Promise on page 59.
Yes, my absolute favorite poem.
Ah, I can see why. I can see why.
Blood Promise. Epigraph. The legends tell we could fly. Chris Abani. Being neither dust nor flesh, our fallen fighters continue circling the sun. No longer with us, they are not gone either. On days the orange fireball contains black flecks, you can make out a black beret or two. Our martyred never travel far from the troubled path. They hover over Sudan, Congo, Haiti, Palestine, and America, concocting ancestral jujus that promise to render colonialism powerless. Be neither discouraged nor despondent. Justice moves on her own timeline, flanked by flames of fuchsia and gold. Rest assured, these restless bones refuse to quiesce. We swallow the bronze-tongued swords. We sip the sea's rage. The coastline is near.
Justice moves on her own timeline. That was the note that I made on that poem. And it was such a critical reminder to me that you do the work anyway and know that the timeline is moving and that she has her own timeline, just like those before us did the work anyway, even though they knew that they would not live to see certain fruits from
Exactly.
their labor, right?
Right.
And living in a society that is so much about instant gratification, is easy to forget that. So that was really important to me. In the process of me inviting you here and prepping for this, it was like a few months ago we made this date or what have you. Assata Shakur passed,
Right.
right? How did that affect you?
It affected me with sadness.
Mm-hmm.
it was unexpected, but then, I don't know the circumstances. Um, I saw her as basically ageless, time that she would be with us forever. So it was a reminder that, we each have our season, and we do what we can with the time that we have. And she certainly made, I don't know, profound mark on the world.
It's interesting. That's one of the things that is so beautiful about this poem that you just read. The flecks around the sun, the black berets, and that they hover nearby. I remember around that time of her passing, when it was confirmed, I don't know who it was, but I remember someone making a post about that and said, shh, don't panic. It's okay. It's okay. They're just going to the other side so they can continue to assist us in an even
I
greater
love that.
way. But that's what you do in this poem. You remind us of that in an even greater way, right? So it's the reminder that they're still assisting us and hovering nearby, but it's also a reminder that we better be about the business of handling the work because they're still close by, which is really, really beautiful, really beautiful. What do you want folks to take away from this book overall?
I want people to, one, be aware that the narrative that society has given us about the Panthers is not the whole story. One thing. I want people to have hope in terms of continuing to struggle, and understand that we have heroes and sheroes who have done similar things before us. And I wanted to convey this from a personal level as well as from an overarching political, historical level.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming here, but also for being so gracious in this book, because in order to do work like this, you have to go back and relive some of those places that make you laugh, some of those places that made you cry, that made you afraid, where you mourned. And so thank you for being so gracious and having the courage to do that and share it with the rest of us. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much for having me, Tamara. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Every time I get to the end of an episode and I haven't cried, I feel like I've done a good job, because poetry is just that person to me. We will have more information about Dr. Godley and her book and everything down in the bio. The book comes out in February of 2026. We encourage you to show the poet and the poem some love, whether it's purchasing a book, attending a lecture or a workshop or what have you, or sharing the book with someone else. And we thank you, and we hope that you will join us for the next episode of Breakdown the Poet and the Poems. Thanks, Joanne.
Thank you.
This opportunity is made possible through the Literary Arts Projects, a program of South Arts.